What is going on, everybody? Welcome to this WrestleMania week special bonus episode of the PipeBomb Wrestling Podcast. I am your host for this episode, the Young Buck, Andy York. Thank you guys so much for tuning in and listening to us. Whether you've been with us from the beginning or this is your first time, we really appreciate you tuning in and joining us each and every week. If you're watching our beautiful faces on the bodyslam.net YouTube channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit that notifications bell, all of that fun stuff so that you never miss out on one of our videos, as well as the other amazing videos that are posted daily on the bodyslam.net YouTube channel. And if you're listening to us on the Sports Wire, we really appreciate you tuning in and listening to us there as well. Make sure you hang around because after our show, there are awesome and other amazing sports-related shows as well. If you are lucky enough to have your team still in March Madness, I'm sure you would love to have people talk about that and listen to that. So lucky dogs, because we are depressed around here. But we are very glad that you are tuning in and listening to us. I could not do this by myself, though. I have to have my host with me, the original host of the PipeBomb Wrestling Podcast, Chris Belcher, joining us. Man, how you doing?
Well, at the time of this recording, I'm not doing great, but as you're listening to this WrestleMania week, I'm doing fantastic, man. As they're listening to this, you and I are already in Dallas, and it's going to be a good time. And just a bunch of content this week, man. It's a busy week, and I'm pumped to be doing this show. It's going to be a blast.
Well, we can't do this by ourselves either because we are talking about something that I have not experienced yet. I'm actually currently experiencing it as we are in the future, or in the past, like it's at this point recording this episode, but couldn't do this alone. Another original host of the PipeBomb Wrestling Podcast. Let me see if I can do this right because I have not done this yet. I've not had the privilege of doing this yet. But the whole podcasting show... Jared Justice, how you doing, man?
What's going on, fellas?
Oh, you nailed it. That's perfect.
Thank you.
I like it.
I don't have the as high of a voice as Chris for it to work as well, but hey, I did the best that I could.
Oh man, that's great.
But we're going to be talking about these fellas' experience at WrestleMania. They went to WrestleMania 34, which was in New Orleans, and then also WrestleMania 35, if you can't tell by Chris's hat, that took place in Newark, New Jersey, not necessarily New York, because people get mad when you call that area New York. So
we were in the shadows of New York City. All right. As Michael Cole said way more times than I can count.
Yeah, which I've heard is like the armpit of America, but that's a different topic for a different day. Anyways,
well, we're going to talk about that. Don't you worry.
I'm sure we will. But we're going to start with WrestleMania 34 because I believe this was both of your first WrestleMania in person. You went to NXT TakeOver as well, which is maybe the best NXT TakeOver of all time. Definitely up there as one of the best. But Chris, I'll let you start. Can I talk about your overall experience going to TakeOver, going to WrestleMania 34, and kind of just the feel that is around the area during WrestleMania?
Listen, whatever city is hosting WrestleMania is nuts during that whole week. Like, it's absolutely bonkers. I'm not even kidding. When people say that WWE takes over a city for WrestleMania, they are not lying. I remember pulling into New Orleans. Jared was sleeping in the car, but that's another story. Pulling into New Orleans, and you see all the street lights that line the city and whatever, and they had the flags on the street lights. And it was all WWE superstars on the flags. And there were huge banners, there was huge trucks, all this other crazy stuff, just all over the place, not even around the Superdome. So like pulling into our hotel, okay, that's cool. We immediately go explore the city and we head over to Access, and just you see everybody there wearing wrestling t-shirts, and it's Jared and we've talked about this, and Jared, I'll throw to you for this sort of experience, and then we'll talk about TakeOver. It's one of those things where it's truly like a sporting event, but it's wrestling, where you're in this place with people that you've never met before, you're never going to see again, and you can strike up a conversation just about anything wrestling related, and dude, just have the best time ever. And we did a lot of that.
Yep. Yeah, I remember different times like at Access, and all the events and everything, standing in lines, all that stuff. and we would talk to people from like different countries,
Yep.
and like you could hear their accents. Some of them would have like their flag like over their shoulders of their country, and it was just interesting, man. Just like he said, it's like basically being surrounded by tens of thousands of your friends who you don't even know because
Right.
everybody's pumped for the weekend. Everybody has the same interest in mind. We're all there for the same reason. Everybody wants to have a good time. And it's just, I mean, it's awesome.
It really is. And then, Andy, to answer your question about TakeOver, yes, I will put my stamp of approval, biased or not biased. This was the greatest TakeOver of all time. There's not been one that's gotten close since or before the best TakeOver of all time in New Orleans. And I can remember that Jared and I had a conversation going into it like, okay, we need to go because it's part of WrestleMania weekend. But it's safe to say that both of us did not have a huge investment in NXT at the time. Like, we knew the top stars. We knew who Aleister Black was. We knew who Adam Cole was. We knew who Johnny Gargano, Tommaso Ciampa, those guys. But to get there and then to see teams like AOP and to see guys like Roddy Strong and Pete Dunne and Shayna Baszler and Ember Moon and Andrade and just all of the incredible superstars on that card, and Jared to kick off the show with the debut of Ricochet in a 6-man ladder match. Holy cow. Like, you talk about setting the tone, not just for NXT, but for WrestleMania weekend. And that's the way you kick off TakeOver. Man, you would think it was all downhill from there, but it wasn't.
Yeah, I mean, it was crazy. I remember talking to Chris, and we were talking about who some of these people were. And I was like, so I wonder if I'm missing out because I haven't been watching this NXT product. And we don't really know, like, who these people are. I mean, Chris, like Chris said, we've heard of these people. But a lot of these people I'd never seen wrestle. Whenever I saw them up on the big screen, some of them I couldn't, if their name wasn't up there, I couldn't have told you who they were.
Right.
But by the end of it, man, I was like, NXT is the shiz. Like, it is awesome.
It was incredible.
Yeah, I've only been able to go to one WWE pay-per-view, and it was Survivor Series. Is one of the big fours in Chicago, and the takeover before that was War Games.
I remember
when
that.
it was Undisputed Era versus Tommaso Ciampa. It was the one where Kevin Owens made the surprise return, and it was all of them together. And the takeover crowd is what made takeover so much fun.
Yep.
Because everybody is so invested, even if, like, you guys may not have known everybody, but the crowd getting into it is what made kind of you get into it as well. So takeover crowds are a different breed. They're kind of like, I hate the comparison, but you kind of got to make the comparison. Takeover crowds are what AEW crowds are now. Like AEW crowds, you may not know. My wife went to AEW with me a couple weeks ago. She doesn't know who half the people are. She was loving every single match because the fans around her were invested. So that definitely plays a big part into it. But let's move on to WrestleMania. WrestleMania 34 in New Orleans. A very up and down WrestleMania across the board. Started off very, very hot with the triple threat between The Miz and Finn Balor and Seth Rollins for the IC title. You had Charlotte Asuka. You had the whole John Cena sitting in the crowd waiting for the Undertaker. A lot of really interesting stuff. I'm sure we'll get to some other stuff that I've already heard Jared talk about before, which I'm very excited to get his thoughts again on some certain things that happened at WrestleMania 34. But overall, kind of give your experience at WrestleMania, your first WrestleMania, not knowing what to expect. You know, the atmosphere outside of the building is one thing, but when you walk into the arena, when you walk into the stadium, kind of what was that like? What was it like walking into WrestleMania 34?
Listen, Jared knows exactly what I'm about to say because I'm taking the words right out of his mouth. Literally, the atmosphere outside, it was cool. Like, it was like the way that the Superdome is set up. They have like a plaza out there, and they had a big concert going on, and everybody was kind of hanging out. It was like a tailgating party, so it was really cool. We have fans everywhere. Everybody was chanting Rusev Day. It is what it is. It's fine, but it was cool. But I told Jared, like, let's go get in line. And Jared knows when you travel with me, I'm adamant about getting places very, very early because
Yep.
I want to not miss out on anything.
Yep.
So if I'm there to go to WrestleMania, let's just freaking go to WrestleMania. Like, what are we waiting on? So we get in line. We are literally probably the first 10,000 people in the door. And Andy, if I'm lying, I'm dying. If I've ever had a euphoric experience in my life, it was walking into the dome for the first time. The minute, and Jared can attest to this, and he'll say the same thing. The minute I walked into the dome, it took my breath away. Legit.
Yeah, it sends me back, and Chris can chime in whenever he wants here. But, us as little bitty fellers, and we were watching this spectacle of WrestleMania, and we always said, we're going to go do that. Now, I don't know that either one of us actually believed that at the time, but we thought in our heads, if this is possible, we are going to get there one day. And so you go in, and I don't know if it's just because it was our first one or what. The first one's always best. But you go in, and the lighting is perfect, and the atmosphere. I mean, you're not outside, you're inside. The temperature is perfect. You have the green and the purple and the gold lights, and they already have everything lit up kind of over the WrestleMania stage. So we're like, oh, look at that, that's the stage, that's awesome. Look at these colors, man, these are awesome colors. This is the theme of WrestleMania. And I honestly think that we were probably one of the first, maybe 3,000, because whenever we first went in there, man, it was empty. I mean, we walked through those curtains, and it was like if you can picture a wrestling fan, they just don't died and went to heaven. Yep. That is the wrestling, heaven. And it was just awesome, man. I mean, like he said, it will take your breath away.
I took a picture right when we walked in, and like Jared said, it's very, very, very empty. I'll put it on our social media at PBW Podcast so y'all can check it out. It's literally, it's like we're the only ones there, and it was just insane. And then, like you said, Andy, then the show starts. We haven't even started the dang show yet. And the show started off in the hottest way possible with the triple threat match, which I think is one of the best Mania matches of all time, honestly. But you had the triple threat match, Charlotte and Asuka, and then Jared, let's skip right to it, man. When those lights went out and that gong hit, and we got to see the Undertaker at WrestleMania. Oh my gosh. If there was anything just as good as walking into the stadium the first time, it was the Undertaker's entrance at WrestleMania.
And the thing is, too, man, you know how they always said, in the 90s, especially the mid-early 90s, and it seemed like it was Jim Ross. I don't know if he got it started, but he would say there's a cool breeze in the air as the Undertaker's coming. I mean, you feel that. Yes. I don't know if they turn the air conditioning on in the building, but there's the smoke rolling. I mean, you kind of get chills, and I've never seen anything like it. It's great.
100% correct.
Yeah, I've only seen Taker once, and I was at a Monday Night Raw, and I got the same feeling, but I'm sure at WrestleMania it's that feeling times 10. So I'm sure it elevates it even more going into that. So WrestleMania 34, we'll start off positive because I think it's always fun to start positive and then go negative. If you had to pick a best moment or we'll say a best match and a best moment of WrestleMania 34, what would you say was the best match of WrestleMania that year, and then what was the best moment?
Best moment, I think we've already covered both of them, is walking into the stadium and seeing the Undertaker. I can't pick anything that was better than that for that WrestleMania. I mean, there were a lot of good things that happened, but that was the coolest thing ever, honestly. Best match of the night, probably the triple threat match, honestly. Right behind it would be Charlotte and Asuka. That match was really, really good. But I think the triple threat match takes cake for me.
Yeah. I don't know, man. I mean, I think the thrill of the night was the Undertaker and John Cena. And I mean, it really wasn't a match, but when I think back, to that WrestleMania, that's what I remember. Like, I can't even tell you every match that happened. If I see them, I can picture all this stuff in my head again, and it brings back memories. But just right off the top of my head, Taker Cena.
Yep.
I mean, it just was what it was.
Yep.
Yeah. I can totally get that, because sitting at home watching it, it blew my mind away, and being there in person, seeing this match that we've never had, like, been able to see at WrestleMania, and then for it to be like it was, of like a 5-minute squash match to John Cena, which has never really happened other than Brock. Like that was probably really, really cool to see that.
And that's what everybody wanted at the time. Like, that's what the fans wanted, was to see Cena get squashed.
Yeah.
And he did.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, let's go to the other side of the spectrum, because I'm sure I know both of your answers for this, and I think they're more than likely going to be different. But what was the worst match of the night, and then what was the worst, if there was a worst moment of WrestleMania that year?
Jared, I'll let you go first with this one.
Wasn't that
yes.
whenever Braun Strowman picked that stupid little brat that was somebody's kin from like backstage, and they bring that idiot into the ring? And I'm like, what is this crap? I mean, this killed my soul while it was going on. Like, okay, I have this Metallica shirt on. Me and Chris saw Metallica. The first half of that concert was so terrible, I wanted to leave until they started playing their old stuff. That's how I felt whenever I saw this child that is coming to the ring and being called Nicholas. That was Dickless. That's what I'll call him. I mean, I never wanted to see this kid again.
Oh my gosh. I'm thankful you didn't say AJ Styles versus Shinsuke Nakamura. Thank you for not doing that.
That was a huge letdown, but it was okay.
Well, the worst. Yes. The worst match of everything was Braun Strowman and Nicholas and the bar. Like, I've gone back and watched that several times since then. It's not nearly as long as it felt in the stadium. Sitting in that stadium with him trying to go around the arena and everything, it was painful.
Well,
it was so bad.
What made it worse is he was passing like really good wrestlers as he was going to find Nicholas. Like, Tanahashi was in the crowd, and like there was a whole bunch of NXT guys in the crowd, and he went to find the little kid. I will ask, would it have made it better if he took a bump, or if he did like if Cesaro did a Cesaro swing to Nicholas, which if
they would have picked him up and thrown him into the front row, that would have been awesome.
Yes. I do not wish violence on a 10-year-old, especially when his dad is the referee of the match.
Yeah, but
Jared does, so we'll go with that. Yes. If Nicholas would have taken some sort of bump, yes, that would have been great.
A Cesaro swing, I think, would be safe. You just spin him around, then you lay him down, and then
that'd have been great.
It'd have been fine. I am surprised also that you guys didn't mention maybe one of the worst main events in WrestleMania history, WrestleMania 34, with Brock Lesnar and Roman Reigns, with the 17,000 F5s that he took and then still kicked out every single time. And I think the only thing I remember from that main event was like Roman getting busted open and the blood kind of pouring from his face, but that still didn't do anything.
Let me tell you what I remember from that main event. I remember sitting in the audience. There were 78,000 other people in that stadium. Probably 77,000 of those people did not give one crap what was going on in the ring. They could have cared less.
Yep.
It was not that they were tired. It was not that they were ready for the show to be over. They were tossing beach balls around. They were literally not paying attention at all. Nobody cared about this match. And it wouldn't have mattered how good it was. Nobody cared. Myself included.
No.
I'm just saying.
We're stuck with that match again this year at WrestleMania, but I think I have a feeling it's going to be better than that debacle, at least hopefully. Anything else that you wanted to kind of bring up or talk about from WrestleMania 34? Maybe something else that kind of stood out to you, or an experience or a story that you wanted to share about WrestleMania 34?
Yes. Jared and I also had the privilege of going to see Something to Wrestle With live. Bruce Pritchard and Conrad Thompson. and seeing a whole slew of special guests with that show, including Jeff Jarrett, JBL, Eric Bischoff, Gerald Briscoe, Pat Patterson, Hurricane, Animal. I'm sure I'm leaving out somebody. But at the time, Something to Wrestle was the biggest podcast in the world, not just wrestling world. Like, it was literally taking over the world.
Yeah.
And to get to see that live, Jared can echo this, and getting to meet those guys for the first time was almost as cool as going to WrestleMania at the time. Jared, wouldn't you agree?
Yeah. Was that whenever that I gave Conrad?
No, that was in New York. We'll get there.
Okay. We'll get there. Okay. So let me ask if this was New York or if this was New Orleans. Was this when Pat Patterson began singing and belting out this song, and I was like, "What is this?" Like, I didn't know that this was like his gimmick, or this is what he does.
Yes.
And I looked at Chris and I was like, have we like teleported somewhere in time? Like, why is this happening? And people they seem to be enjoying it. I wasn't.
Yep.
But that was cool, especially now that Pat's gone. It was cool that we got to experience that, even though I didn't know what the crap was happening while I was witnessing it.
Yes. And then JBL leading his chants.
Drugs. And I mean, so we're not going to accuse anybody on this show, but I don't know. JBL, he was not sober. I do not believe. I don't know what he had been doing, but it did not seem like somebody who I've seen who's just been drinking. Let's just put it that way. And so he was tickled to death to lead this chant of drugs. And I don't know if we're surrounded by heroin addicts, but people were getting into it. I mean, they were cheering. I mean, they were ready for some drugs. I mean, so that was funny. That was something
amazing.
I'll never forget. Yeah.
It was so good. JBL was telling stories about taking Hornswoggle and putting him in luggage carts and hiding him and pushing him around everywhere. And just all kinds of craziness. But that show was absolutely incredible. It was so much fun. I don't think I've ever laughed so hard in my entire life. They had us rolling. That was the first time I'd ever heard Bruce Pritchard do his impression of Jim Ross commentating Sonny's porn, which was amazing.
She pointed.
Just saying, it's. I'm telling this because it's on the internet somewhere. Y'all can go find him talking about it. I'm not revealing anything they haven't already revealed, but just so much incredible stuff. And Jared, honestly, like, you and I have talked about this so many times. You and I are closer than brothers and have been since 94, I think, is when my mom married your uncle, my stepdad. I think 94, right. I think, is when they got married. We have been closer than brothers since then. And then we had a couple of years there where Jared got a job. I went to college, got married, and we kind of separated, kind of went our own way for a couple of years because I moved down here and that kind of thing. And then we rekindled about 2 years before this, before going to WrestleMania. But in those couple of years that we weren't hanging out all the time, we didn't there was nothing lost. Like, we picked right back up where we left off. So getting to share this experience, like Jared said earlier, two little fellas sitting on the couch watching WrestleMania specifically, said, "Oh, we're going to do that. We're going to do that." And then Andy, I remember it. If I'm lying, I'm dying. This is exactly how it happened. I drove into my garage one night. I was coming home from playing a gig. It was about 2:30 in the morning. And I was talking to Jared on the phone because Jared didn't sleep back then. He was up at all hours of the night. So we're talking on the phone like 2:30 in the morning. I pull into my garage. We're talking about WrestleMania. We already know that it's in New Orleans. And I told Jared, I said, "Why are we not going?" And he goes, "I don't know." I said, "Let's go." And he's like, well, what do we need to do? How, what do we need to book? How do we do this? And I'm like, I don't know, but we're going. I said, I don't have a clue how any of this is going to work, but we're going.
Yeah.
And we made a pact. We made it happen. We had some crap come up for this trip and the next trip. But Andy, when I'm telling you that we walked in together to that Superdome and saw it for the first time, it literally was two young boys' dreams coming true, like walking into that. So getting to share that for the first time, it like nothing will ever top WrestleMania 34, in my opinion.
No. And so I remember, or at least, in your mind's eye, you see things and you don't remember if this is actually how it happened. But again, Chris can chime in. It seemed like we were sitting at my uncle's and his mother's house in his room, and he had like a TV, man. I mean, this thing was microscopic, and it had a VHS player built into this thing. And I mean, and so we're sitting there, and I think we have maybe my blue Hasbro wrestling ring. It was either that one or the big, huge, giant monster ring that they recreated from the LJNs that Chris had.
Right.
And we were sitting there watching, I think it was WrestleMania 7, because we watched this daggone WrestleMania 7 and 6 and 8 time and time again, at 10, at 12. And so we're sitting there, and we're watching it, and I'm like, do you think we're ever going to go there? And I mean, I don't remember what Chris's answer was, but I remember that we both were like, we need to. And like, we were dreaming of making this happen. And I mean, we were what? Probably, I was like 13 and you were 9, 10, something like that, I guess.
Probably. Yep.
Somewhere around those ages. But anyways, from that point on, and it was just something that we always wanted to do. And I don't know that, like I said earlier, deep in my heart, I don't know that I ever thought it was going to come true. But it did. And just, this first time, you just can't explain it. You're getting ready to experience this, Andy. This is going to be your first time, man. And then I want to hear what you say. Maybe I'll interview you. But, I mean, there's nothing like it, dude. The first time that you see it, it's just crazy.
Yep.
Yeah, I am fully expecting it to be a mind-blowing experience. It's kind of one of those things of whether the card is great or not, it's WrestleMania. So, like, being there in person, it's already going to be better than just sitting at home watching it each and every year. So that's definitely going to be really, really awesome to see that. So, WrestleMania 34, New Orleans, your first WrestleMania. You also had the privilege of going to WrestleMania 35 the year later, the next year, in New York, New Jersey, somewhere up in that area. Kind of talk about the differences, because I'm sure each WrestleMania is special and different in its own way. Kind of talk about the differences that you kind of face between going to WrestleMania 34 and going to WrestleMania 35.
Well, I'll start. And the biggest difference, obviously, and Jared gets a kick out of this when we talk about this, the biggest difference is New Orleans versus New York. Because I was good. WrestleMania 34, I was good. It's fine. We get around September, October, and Jared starts saying, I really want to see New York. We really need to go to WrestleMania. I'm like, I've been to New York. I don't like navigating New York. No way, not going to happen. And Jared's like, come on, let's do it. I said, okay, let's do it. So we did it. The biggest difference, honestly, like when I say New Orleans and New York, like, I mean it. Like for New Orleans, everything was in about a 2-mile radius. Like we walked everywhere and it was fine. Not a big deal. Anybody that knows anything about New York knows you're walking. Everything is kind of crammed together, but there's not a good layout for everything. The stadium is in New Jersey. Everything else is in Brooklyn. We had to fly there because I was not driving in New York. Like I drove to New Orleans, wasn't driving to New York. So we had to fly there. So we were at the mercy of Ubers and all this other stuff to get everywhere. And if you know anything about New York and Ubers, it takes forever to get anywhere. Right, Jared?
Yes. Yes, it does. And it's very cold.
It was cold.
And so what was that we were waiting in line for? We're out there.
So,
we're getting friggin' snowed on. There's ice falling. Not rain. It is ice. And I'm like, dude, can we please just like get an Uber and get out of here? Oh no, man! Like we're going to get this transport. It's free. It's running. We just got to wait a little bit. Well, this SOB is like a little Eskimo. He's bundled up. He knew what he was getting into. I'm wearing like shorts and like a hoodie. So yeah, I'm sitting there like this. And anybody who knows me knows I don't get cold easily. I was cold. He makes me stand there the entire time, like not underneath the shed for the majority of it, getting iced and snowed on, and he's perfectly fine. And I'm like, dude, I hate you. It's cold.
So for the other side of this story, here's what actually happened. No, like 100% of what Jared just said is very true, but I will give context to what we're talking about. So anybody that knows anything about the weather in New York knows it's like the weather in Nashville. One day it's spring, the other day it's winter, one day it's summer. And that legit happened the weekend of WrestleMania. So on Friday, the night he is referring to, we had flown in early Friday afternoon, I believe. And we had taken an Uber from our hotel, which was very, very close to MetLife Stadium. So we stayed in Jersey. And we took an Uber. I love that Jared's just kicking back and relaxing. We took an Uber.
I want to hear this.
We took an Uber to Brooklyn because that's where Access was. So we would go to the Superstore, and NXT TakeOver was that night. So we Ubered over there. And then I had read that WWE was actually offering bus transportation from Access to the arena NXT free.
If you don't die first.
Perfect. That's great. That's one less Uber we got to get. All right. So we're in Access, whatever. Now, the detail that Jared failed to mention was that before we left the hotel, I changed from shorts to jeans. I put a long sleeve shirt on and a hoodie. And I told Jared, I said, Jared, it is going to be cold. You might not want to wear shorts. Nah, I'll be fine. I don't get cold. Okay. Just warning you. So we get there.
Yeah, this is true.
And thank you for admitting. So we get there, we finish up at Access, and it's about time to go catch this bus so we can get over to the arena. Now, it's not very far. They're both in Brooklyn, but anybody knows that one block in New York takes at least 10 minutes. That's about average. So if you're going 6 blocks, you better account for about an hour. So we go line up for this bus, and everybody else has the same idea that we do. So there is a little shed, like Jared said, for you to line up under, but the line has wrapped all the way around the sidewalk and, is a pretty good distance. So we did have to wait for a little bit in the cold. It was icing. It was not raining. It was icing. That is correct. But Jared, we got in the bus. We made it to the arena. We walked in enough time to get some refreshments, and we sat down in our seats. The lights went out and the show started. Could not have been more perfect timing. It worked out. No, he did ask me, hey, let's get an Uber. And I said, no, we're good. We're good.
Begged.
Well, what about hang on, I have a question. What about the trip back? Was it the same?
We caught an Uber at the arena back to our hotel.
You listened to me this time. Yeah.
Yeah, I did. That's true. But so we got an Uber from TakeOver back to the hotel. So that the trip back wasn't horrible.
Yeah.
But that was the long-winded answer of saying the differences. We didn't have to wait anywhere in New York or in New Orleans. We didn't have to Uber anywhere in New Orleans. Take that back. The morning of Access, when I went to go meet AJ Styles, it was pouring rain, and I Ubered to Access. It was about a mile, but it was like downpouring, and I was not going to walk it. So
yeah,
there you go.
I was asleep.
You were asleep. That is correct.
So I think the moral of the story is only go to WrestleMania is where it's indoor. And not in the cold area
Bingo.
of America. Well, we're in Texas.
Especially
this
if
year,
you're
so we're
going
good.
with Christopher Belcher. So.
Yes.
Oh, well, since we're on the topic of transportation and moving forward, I've been told multiple times that I have to bring up something about parking at WrestleMania 35. So whoever is going to take it away can take it away about the parking at WrestleMania 35 or another experience at WrestleMania that you had to deal with.
So I'll start this story, and then Jared, I like you to take it for after WrestleMania. So we get a hotel 10 minutes from the stadium, a legit 10-minute walk from the stadium. Fantastic. We're going to walk there. We're going to walk back. Fantastic. 10 minutes. Awesome. So we decided the day of WrestleMania, let's not walk it over. Let's Uber over. It'll be faster. We'll get there a lot faster. And then we will walk back afterwards because, as Jared knows, I warned him ahead of time, the transportation afterwards, trying to get an Uber, because I've experienced like ball games and stuff like that. Trying to get an Uber
Nightmare.
with 80,000 other people is stupid ridiculous. I'm not doing it. That's why I got the hotel where I got it, so that we could walk. Well, we go to WrestleMania, we Uber there, it's fine. We come out of WrestleMania, and this is public knowledge as well. WWE did not tell the state of New Jersey that the show was going over. There is a Metro train station right outside of MetLife Stadium. They had one train going at the end of the night. One.
Oh my gosh.
That is public knowledge, because the state of New Jersey said if WWE would have told them, they would have had more than one train going. They only had one. So you can imagine what the Uber situation was like. Jared, what happened when we tried to walk out of the parking lot and just walk on our own?
So if you go to WrestleMania, you want there to be a Hell in the Cell. You want there to be people caged in like animals and not be able to get out, okay? This actually happened to all the fans once you got into the parking lot. There's fences everywhere. You're caged in. You can't get out. There's cops that are standing on these non-existent sidewalks, like flashing their little lights and telling the people you can't go here, you can't go there. Traffic's buzzing all around. We go from cage to cage to cage to cage in this parking lot, and we can't get out. I mean, you can't. Like, cars can come in and out one way, but humans cannot.
The cops legit told us you cannot walk out of here. You can't.
Yes. So at this time, it starts raining. Imagine that. It was nice. It was raining. So
Jared, again,
like, what are we
Jared,
going to
again,
do?
why don't we provide context? Jared, did you wear long pants or sleeves or anything for this?
No, I'm never going to.
I didn't think so. Yeah. Carry on.
Anyways, we're trying to figure out what we're going to do. We finally found an Uber, but we're going to have to pay like what, $230 some for like few blocks.
It was something.
Something ridiculous.
Something stupid.
Yeah. At this point, we were willing to do it. Yeah, we were like, we have to get out of here. And I mean, there's thousands of other people around. You know,
because we had waited 2 hours. 2 Ubers had canceled on us because they said they couldn't get there. Yep. Well, duh, because traffic is insane. But they canceled on us. So we were willing to go with the Uber Black, which was a lot more expensive, but they were willing to come get us. So, okay, cool. Carry on, Jared.
So we saw a lot of interesting things in this parking lot track, like animals.
In 2 hours.
So one thing I noticed, there was a very large man. So if you can picture somebody who, in my mind, when I remember him, is about the height of the Great Khali and about the weight of Yokozuna. Like, I don't know if this guy was like a king in a different country and like we didn't know who he was, if he got his crown at home. But hey, like, I noticed, I'm like, hey, Chris, check this out. What's going on over here? And so this man is taking like a few steps. And there's another man who looks like he's legitimately from Ethiopia, hasn't eaten in maybe a couple months. And
he's probably my size. He's my size. So compare me to this giant individual. Go ahead.
Gosh.
Every time that this massive man takes a few steps, he gets tired. You know, he's breathing heavy. Those little lungs that little heart trying to go. You know, it just doesn't work. So the Ethiopian-sized man puts a chair underneath this man's ass, and he sits down. Whoa! Takes himself a break before he gets up to walk like 5 to 10 more steps. And by this time, he's tired again. So he sits back down once the little Ethiopian puts the chair underneath him. And this continues until they get somewhere out of sight. And I was in amazement. I was like, what have we? This is a spectacle right here in and of itself.
They had to reinforce
Chris,
that
go
chair.
ahead.
Let me just tell you, they had to reinforce.
I don't know how
that
it held
chair.
him.
I don't know. It was amazing. It was so amazing. So while all of this is happening and we order the Uber Black and the Uber Black is on its way, we're watching this amazing spectacle of this man. It starts raining even harder. Okay. At this point, it is very, very consistent rain. Okay. So we're standing literally in the same spot in the Uber Black pickup area, because apparently the Uber Black pickup area and the Uber pickup area are two different places in this stadium. Didn't know that. Okay, cool. We're standing where we're supposed to stand. Okay. So the rain's coming down, and there's been this SUV that's been parked.
And the floods came up.
Yeah. Floods came up for sure. There's this SUV that's been parked to the left of us, probably for about an hour. Okay. And we didn't think anything of it, whatever. Now, what I'm about to tell you might have not been the smartest decision that Jared and I have ever made. Andy, I'm not going to recommend that we do it when we go to Dallas.
Okay.
But what I'm about to tell you is probably not something smart, but we did it and we are here to tell about it. So a guy steps out of this SUV, and he's a fairly large gentleman himself. I'm not as big as dude in the chair, but he's a fairly large individual. Walks over to Jared and I.
It wasn't as
says,
big as King Momar. But
No, he was not. He walks over to Jared and I, and he says, "Hey, what's going on, guys?" And I said, "We're standing here waiting on a ride." And he goes, "Well, I've got an Uber right here. Where are y'all going?" Told him where we were going. He looked it up on maps. He said, "Oh, well, that's on the way to where I'm going. Once y'all just hop in with me, I'll give you a ride." And we said, "Are you sure? Like, really?" And he goes, Yeah. Hop in with me. No problem. We said, "Okay, what do we owe you?" And he said, No, nothing. It'll be on my Uber. Just hop in. And Jared and I were both like, "Sweet, let's go." Not until we get in the car do we realize what we have just done. And like, oh crap, we're in New York. We just hopped in somebody's car that invited us. We have no idea where we're going, hoping they get us to the right spot. But sure enough, we get in there, and the guy tells his driver, he says, "Hey, put in this address. We're going to go here first, and then we'll continue and we'll drop me off." And we get there. Nothing happened. They dropped us off. It was fine. In the meantime, Jared, how many times did he ask us if it was our first WrestleMania? This guy was a little out there. He was a little out there.
He smelled very strongly of alcohol. But I mean, I would say 5 to 6 times
at least. He said, "Is this your first WrestleMania?" And we tell him we went last year. "Oh, I remember I was there last year. Oh man, that's so cool. Yeah, man." We get silent for a minute. "Hey, is this your have y'all ever been to WrestleMania before?" Legit. It happened. So somehow, some way, Jared and I safely made it from our seats at MetLife Stadium to our hotel. It took us about 3 hours, but all of those things happened in between.
Oh my gosh.
None of that is made up.
This guy, like I was sitting diagonal from him, where the guy that had offered the Uber. The driver's in front of me. Mm-hmm. This guy's diagonal. So I already had a plan in my mind. I'm like, if this starts going south, I had room. So I was going to get up and hit him as hard as I could with my shoulder and hopefully knock him out the door. And then I was going to be like, Chris, let's go. Get out of here.
The issue with all of that
Chris,
was
on my back.
we were in a black SUV that had a third row. So I was in said third row. So if this went south, I was really in trouble. So in Jared's mind, he's thinking, okay, I got to create a way for us to get out and for Chris to be able to climb out at the same time for all if it really goes south. But daggum, ladies and gentlemen, none of this is made up. This all legit happened. I can't believe it happened. But we're here to tell about it.
Oh my gosh. That's sounds like it was worth the trip just for that experience.
It kind of was, actually.
At the end. Oh man. Well,
I'll say this. Anytime anybody asks us about WrestleMania 35, that is the first story that either one of us tell. Hands down. That's the first one.
Wow. That is amazing. That is absolutely amazing. Well,
Right?
let's talk about WrestleMania 35 itself. We'll jump back into the actual Mania itself because it was a pretty consistent, I would say, WrestleMania. Card to card, bell to bell, I think it was probably better than WrestleMania 34 because it had a lot of really high spot moments, and there was no child wrestling that year as well, which definitely benefited from it. But if you had to pick like a top moment and a top match from this WrestleMania, what would you pick? Like, what would be that top match and moment from WrestleMania 35?
Oh man, I'll start. The top moment for me, WrestleMania 35, the unexpected moment was getting Hulk Hogan at the beginning of the show. That was amazing. The pop that he got was really, really cool. Just not knowing he was going to be there, that was really cool. But the best moment for me was Seth Rollins winning to kick the show off. I don't think I've ever screamed so loud at a WrestleMania or at a wrestling show, period, in my life as to when Seth Rollins won the title. The pop that he got that night was one of the loudest pops I've ever heard at a wrestling event. And that's not me blowing smoke. That is legit. That's one of the loudest pops I've ever heard. But match of the night for me, man, I'm going to have to go with Triple H and Batista. Seeing that match, that no holds barred match, for me, being a big Triple H fan and seeing one of his last matches in person, like that was really, really cool. And to see it against Batista, have Shawn Michaels on commentary, like that was really cool for me.
Yeah.
I think probably Becky winning was what I remember. Whenever I look back, the first thing I remember. And I remember too, like Chris was talking about. So, you know, we have Hulk Hogan, and he's just come out. We didn't know he was going to be there.
Right.
And then here comes Paul Heyman walking down to the ring. And so, like, me and Chris are looking at each other like, what's going on here? Why has the Penguin Man come out? And so then they start announcing that we're getting, you know, what we thought would probably be the main event, or at least right next to the main event. Mm-hmm. It's happening right now. So I don't remember if it was after Hogan came out or if it was after that Rollins won. Maybe both. But like me and Chris look at each other, we're just like, oh, and like you don't know whether to go for a bro hug or you go for a high five, you're going to butt some fists. So we're just like, ah. I mean, it was crazy. If there had been a roof, it would have come off the place. I mean, people were going nuts.
Yeah, it was insane. It really was. So yeah, I'm glad that we can agree that was probably the coolest moment. And then Becky winning, man, if it hadn't happened at 12:30 at night, I think a lot more people would have been excited about it, but daggum, we were dead by that point. But yes, to your point, Andy, I think 34 was better, but again, I'm looking at it from a biased perspective. 35 probably had some better matchups. But it just seemed a lot longer because there were more matches and there were video package with every single match.
Yeah.
So, but for the most part, I'd say star power, 35 had more star power. I think you're right.
Well, I think I remember more about 35 than I do 34. Because like you said, it's like we talked about, it starts off with Seth and Brock. You also have Becky winning the main event. You also have Kofi in the middle winning the WWE Championship, which got a big pop. Roman Reigns' first match after leukemia. There's just a lot of moments, I think. I think WrestleMania 35 had a lot more of bigger moments than probably 34 did. And most of them were great, but there was also a couple that were not the best. And so, if you had to pick a worst match and moment from WrestleMania 35, what would you say was that for you guys?
Oh, dang, we didn't even mention John Cena being there, coming back as the Doctor of Thugonomics.
Yeah,
and that was a huge pop. Oh, my gosh.
That was cool.
When he showed up and was rapping with Elias, oh, man, that was so cool. Worst moment of the show for me, gosh, man, I probably could have done without the women's tag title fatal 4-way. That I just, it kind of is what it is. And the whole Kurt Angle Baron Corbin thing really rubbed me the wrong way. Kurt Angle's last match and putting over Baron Corbin. We all knew that he was going to lose, so it was kind of like a sad situation. It was cool to see Kurt, but we all knew he was going to lose. So it was really deflating for the audience, I think.
Well, I think it's one of those, like, if you know go ahead.
I was just going to say, people are going to think this is strange, but I do not like the New Day. And when I think back of the worst thing, I hated the whole Kofi Mania, everything about it. I did not want Kofi to win. I did not have any interest in Kofi Mania. I don't care if I never see New Day again in my life. I hope Big E is fine. I mean, they all seem like good people. I just don't want to see them. Didn't want to see them that night. And so that's what I remember as being the worst until Chris just brought up the Kurt Angle debacle again, if you will. And Kurt even says that he suggested like some good people like Cena to have that match with. And for whatever reason, the old man wouldn't go for it. So That just kind of makes it even more depressing. But we could have seen something awesome, and we didn't.
Well, that's what I was going to say is if you know you're going to have Cena there for WrestleMania 35, why not do Cena Angle as Angle's last match? Like, I know that's not something necessarily John Cena needs. Right. I'd much rather see John Cena versus Kurt Angle as his last match than Baron Corbin and Kurt Angle, because I forgot it even happened until you just mentioned it. So that kind of shows the impact that it had.
Unfortunately, it did happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything else that you guys remember or want to talk about or bring up about WrestleMania 35 or 34 before we kind of put a bow on this week's episode?
Well, I'll start. I didn't mention going to Access and meeting AJ Styles and Alexa Bliss in New Orleans. That was one of the coolest experiences ever. AJ Styles is probably the nicest pro wrestler next to Chris Jericho that I've ever met in my life. Such a cool guy. Couldn't have been more personable, couldn't have been more gracious with his time. And then the following year, Jared got to meet Becky Lynch in New York, and I got to meet Seth Rollins. So the opener and the closer as champions out of WrestleMania, we got to meet them both that weekend. So it was an incredible experience. It really was. We got to see Bruce Pritchard's show that weekend. It wasn't as fun as the previous year because it was his last one and he was already back with WWE at the time, but it was still really, really cool. One last go around. That is where Jared mentioned earlier, he brought Conrad a custom action figure of Akeem that looks just like Conrad. So that was really, really cool. And we didn't even mention anything about TakeOver. Man, Johnny Gargano versus Adam Cole, 2 out of 3 falls for the NXT Championship. The best wrestling match I've ever seen in person. You talk about the crowds at TakeOver, and you hear people talk about the New York crowds.
Yeah.
That was the most insane crowd I've ever been a part of. Just unbelievable at that TakeOver, man. It was certainly a highlight of that weekend for sure. Sorry, Jerry.
And seeing Becky... seeing Becky Lynch, man, cool because like whenever me and Chris met Chris Jericho, the thing that I value in people is that they don't look down on other people or don't think they're better than other people. And talking to Chris Jericho and Fozzy is just like hanging out with your buddies, man. And I can say the same thing about Becky Lynch. I mean, a lot from what I've heard, and I think Chris maybe even said something about whenever he met Alexa Bliss. But a lot of your female talent, I mean, they know they're good looking, and it's mostly guys that are around them. And whenever I met Becky, she was not standoffish. she wasn't, like, oh, are these guys going to, like, try to hug me or anything? Like, she voluntarily was hugging men and women, kids that came up to her. And I mean, she was just so personable, man. And I even told her as I was walking off, I was like, "You were the coolest wrestler that I've ever met. You and Chris Jericho." And she was like, "Oh, thank you," in her accent. But it was super cool, man. Meeting her, I'll remember that. So that was awesome.
Yeah, meeting Alexa, to what Jared is saying, I felt like Alexa was not necessarily standoffish in meeting guys, but I do think that she has probably had some rough relationship experiences from some of the things that I've heard her talk about in interviews that maybe causes her to be a little bit standoffish when meeting guys. So that was one of the things that kind of, I don't know, Jared. I don't want to say it was bad, because it certainly wasn't, but it was just kind of, it didn't put a damper on the situation, but I understood why it happened. But
Right.
all that to say, man, talking about WrestleMania Access and just getting to go through all those exhibits, we didn't even touch on that, dude. Us being able to get in the coffin of the Undertaker and the Raw symbol and the ECW set, man, just as little bitty kids being wrestling fans, how cool was it for us to get to see stuff like that?
Yeah, especially the Raw set, the old neon, light up WWE or WWF that they used to walk through in Raw's early years. And we got a killer picture, man. I think I was doing the Stone Cold pose, and you were doing like Razor or somebody. Who was it, Jericho or Razor that you were?
I think it was Jericho, because I was wearing a Jericho shirt at the time.
Okay.
I think that's what happened.
We got super cool pictures in front of that, man, that we grew up, seeing every Monday night. And it's just crazy to actually, like, hey, there it is.
Right.
So I thought that access, again, was like a wrestling fan's version of heaven. You're walking through and you're seeing all this cool stuff that you've seen on TV, and you saw the props when they were actually used, Undertaker's urn and so on and so forth. And here it is, man. It's right in front of you. The only thing that's separating you from it is a little thin piece of glass in a lot of cases.
Right. And, not to mention the elimination chamber was the legit elimination chamber was right in the middle of the whole thing. You could get up in it. You and I got up in the ring of WrestleMania 1. They had the original WrestleMania ring in the middle of Access. You and I got up in it, took a picture. So just all of those things, man, it was just so cool to be able to check out those things. And, like you said, man, every wrestling fan's dream to get to see those things and to do those things. Access is part of the experience. Takeover, part of the experience. Meeting people and going to podcast shows and going to, we didn't even mention part of the difference in New Orleans and New York. We went to Monday Night Raw after New York, which was cool because we got to say
we saw Taker there.
And we saw a Taker there. That's right. We got a surprise Taker because he wasn't on the card at WrestleMania 35. But that made it different, and that made it a lot of fun. But man, New Orleans was awesome for New Orleans reasons. New York had its reasons for being awesome. But all in all, if we've got any advice to people that are listening that have never been to WrestleMania and you've made excuses all your life for not going, listen, just strap up and go. Like, you honestly, as a wrestling fan, it's something you have to experience. It is, especially if you're a lifelong wrestling fan like we are, right?
Correct. Yeah. You won't regret it. I can guarantee you that.
Yeah. It's certainly an experience unlike anything else. But man, if obviously New Orleans was your favorite because it was the first one and we had such an awesome time there. But if you had to explain it to somebody, if somebody's like, okay, Jared, you've been to 2 WrestleManias as a lifelong wrestling fan, like, what was that like? Like, if you have to, especially to like a non-wrestling fan, how would you describe an experience going to the Super Bowl of wrestling?
Well, that's exactly what I was going to use to describe it is, there's a lot more football fans, of course, NFL fans.
Right.
in this country than there is wrestling fans. But I mean, it is the Super Bowl basically of whatever you like. If you like UFC, if you liked ECW back in the day, if you like basketball, college basketball, whatever. This is the Super Bowl of whatever activity, whatever it is that you watch and you love and you basically have been obsessed with on and off in your life. This is, I mean, that's WrestleMania is a wrestling fan's version of whatever your favorite thing is. It's just, imagine as big as you can go in basketball or anything, you're going to get to see the show of the year. It can't get no bigger. It's all built up to this. And there you are. You're at it. This is what people are going to talk about for years and years to come. If they make sets of all the WrestleManias and microchips or whatever they come up with next, we're there, man. I mean, We were there. We can say, hey, I was in that building. This is part of history. And so you can't beat that.
You can't. You really can't. And I think that's the best way to put a bow on this episode. Andy is having some technical issues. That is why he is dropped off the map, so to speak. But we're going to wrap this thing up, put a bow on it. This is WrestleMania week. We're cranking out a whole bunch of content. We hope you have enjoyed it. Very sad that Jared is not joining us in Dallas this year, but we know we'll get him on the next one, especially when SummerSlam rolls into Music City this summer. Jared will be hanging out with us for that for sure. But for all of your wrestling needs, hey, make sure you're following along with us at PBW Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We drop new shows every Monday and Wednesday, sometimes on Thursdays. And then when WrestleMania rolls around, we drop them every day. So make sure you follow along wherever you find your podcast. Subscribe to the BodySlam.net YouTube channel. Show those guys some love and support over there. I know they would appreciate it as well. Jared, thanks for hopping on. This is one show that I knew that we had to do for WrestleMania week, and I knew that I couldn't do it without you. So I appreciate you taking the time and joining your old buddies again.
Yes, sir. Glad to do it.
Absolutely. All right, for Mr. Jared Justice, for the Young Buck, Mr. Andy York, my name is Chris Belcher. Thanks for hanging out with us today on the PipeBomb Wrestling Podcast. We will catch you guys down the road.